to Module 1, Voxstar. Are you ready to learn all about the basics of the singing voice? I think you are, so let's jump right in. This very first lesson is all about the voice and understanding how it works. Hence, the voice explained. All instruments in this world, not just the voice, but pianos, guitars, drums, violins, saxophones, all of them, they are all categorized and put into 3 different categories: a wind instrument, string instrument, and percussion instrument. A wind instrument is anything that you blow into to make sound. For example, a saxophone. A string instrument is an instrument that needs strings that you pluck, or, like a guitar would be plucking it or strumming it. A violin, you would be like stroking it. So those are string instruments. And a percussion instrument would be a drum set, for example, something that you hit to make sound. So what do you think the voice is? Is it a wind instrument, a string instrument, or a percussion instrument? What is it? What is it? What do you think? What's your answer? Well, the answer is not so simple. The voice is a wind instrument because without air, there is no sound. But it is also a string instrument because our vocal cords act like strings and they vibrate against each other to make sound. And without those vocal cords, without our strings, we couldn't be making sound either. So the voice is a mix between a wind and a string instrument. What I want to do now is explain the voice and how it works and all the different components, how they work together for you to make the sound that you want to make, so you can understand how your voice works and which parts you have to manipulate to get the desired outcome, okay? Understanding your instrument is so important because you will learn so much faster and you will be able to basically coach yourself a little bit because you know that, oh, your larynx needs to be low to create a warmer sound, or if it's high, it's a more squeezed sound. You'll know all these things so you can, coach yourself basically while you're waiting for your next private lesson. I want to start with the 4 components that your voice needs to create sound. You have the actuator, the vibrators, the resonators, and the articulators. You need all 4 of those parts to make sound. Let's start with the actuator. The actuator is your breath, and that is exactly why you are a wind instrument, right? You need air to make sound. You breathe in, and then you exhale, and your air travels from your lungs all the way up until it reaches your vibrators. Your vibrators are obviously your vocal cords, right? Your vocal cords are shaped like a V and they vibrate against each other to make sound. Now they need that air to come through, right? Through the vocal cords to vibrate against each other, okay? So that's your vibrators, your vocal cords. So the air travels up from your lungs, through your vocal cords, which makes them vibrate against each other. The next step they reach is your resonators. Your resonators are your larynx, pharynx, oral and nasal cavities. These resonators take your sound, and it's basically, think of this as post-production. The sound that your vocal cords are creating is a very raw sound and sounds nothing like what you hear when your sound is coming out of your mouth. It's very raw and sounds nothing like you normally sound like. The resonators take that sound and do a little bit of post-production magic work and create your unique tone. Okay, so you are recognizable by just, your voice. So your resonators, which are the larynx, the pharynx, the oral and nasal cavities, create the tone that everybody knows you by, if that's English. Okay, so that's your resonators, which is the 4th component. And then last but not least, your articulators, which is your jaw, your tongue, your teeth, your soft and hard palate, everything that you need to articulate words, right? So you could technically make sound without those, but if you want to create language, you need your articulators, right? Your tongue is constantly moving when you are speaking. We use our teeth like that, right, to make sound as well. So those are your articulators. So again, your air, your actuator, travels up, 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 up from your lungs all the way through your vocal cords, your vibrators, where they then vibrate against each other to create a very raw sounding sound. Then that raw sound travels through your resonators, your larynx, pharynx, oral, nasal cavities, and they do their magic post-production work, and then it comes out of your mouth through your articulators where you are creating language. Let's now have a closer look at the vocal cords because they are doing a lot of the work, and a lot of the manipulation that's happening at the vocal cords really changes the outcome of your sound, okay? So as I said, your vocal cords are shaped like a V. They are in your throat like this, not like this. Okay, that is important to understand. They are horizontally laid in your throat, and they vibrate against each other to make sound. There are a bunch of muscles in your vocal cords, but there's 3 that I want to talk to you about. The first muscle is called the transverse arytenoid muscle, and it is attached right here at the end of your vocal cords. And what this muscle does is basically pull the vocal cords together so they vibrate against each other to make sound. So when we're just breathing, our vocal cords are open, right? I'm trying to make my breath audible on purpose, but usually we don't hear our breath when we're breathing, right? But that means our vocal cords are open and air can just come through. When we then want to speak or sing, we use that transverse arytenoid muscle to get the vocal cords together to vibrate. Then the other 2 muscles are here to manipulate our pitch. Those 2 muscles are called the thyroarytenoid muscle, or TA muscle, and the cricothyroid muscle, also called the CT muscle. Now, before we dig into what exactly these muscles are doing, you need to understand this. The shorter the vocal cords, the thicker they are, and the lower the note is you're singing. The longer the vocal cords, the thinner they are, and the higher notes you're singing as well. So short and thick equals low, long and thin equals high. Your vocal cords physically cannot be long and thick, okay? It's like a rubber band. Imagine stretching a rubber band. The more you stretch it out, the thinner it gets. It's exactly the same for the voice. That is why it is physically impossible to get that body, that warmth to your voice in the head voice notes because your vocal cords are thinner. They cannot be thick. Have you ever cracked before? Like, like that? That's when you were trying to keep that thickness in your vocal cords and take it into higher notes. And then eventually your voice is like, well, that does not work. And your voice kind of like snaps and they become thin quickly, immediately, abruptly. So the TA muscle, which is also your chest voice muscle, basically shortens and thickens your vocal cords to help you sing lower. The CT muscle is basically your head voice muscle, which elongates and stretches out your vocal cords so you can sing higher. Now, it does that by tilting your larynx, which is this part right here. Okay, if you put your hand on your throat, you'll feel that. It's this cartilage right here. That's your larynx. It stretches out the vocal cords by tilting your larynx forward, okay? So the vocal cords basically get stretched forward. Okay, now if you are reaching up with your chin when you're trying to sing higher notes and your larynx is tilting forward, guess what? It's not going to work so well because the skin here is all stretched out. And if you're trying to sing high notes and your larynx tries to tilt forward, it's not going to work really well, okay? It will work, but you're going to create a lot of tension. So make sure you keep your chin down even when you're singing high notes, okay? So that's how your vocal cords are working. Remember, the vocal cords mostly change just the pitch. Yes, your tone a little bit because they are thicker or thinner depending on how high you sing, but they're mostly responsible for changing the pitch of your voice. Now, I want to talk about the larynx. We already talked about it real quick. If you put your hand right here on your throat and you swallow, the larynx moves up, right? And if you yawn, the larynx moves down. And it's very natural for the larynx to move up and down. Usually, the higher you sing, the higher the larynx, and the lower you sing, the lower the larynx. But again, we can manipulate it. If we want that little bit more round and warm sound up in the higher notes, I try and keep the larynx low rather than right? That's a more flat sound. Is with a low larynx, okay? So you can manipulate your larynx. Now, what I just did was not change the pitch, right? My vocal cords, they stayed at the same length, right? And they did not do anything besides that. They just stayed at the same length and they were vibrating, and that's it. So the note, the pitch that I was singing was the same, but it was a completely different tone, wasn't it? That means your larynx manipulates your tone, not the pitch, okay? So your vocal cords manipulate the pitch and your larynx manipulate the tone. Now, all of your resonators manipulate the tone, but the larynx is a huge, huge, huge part of that because it is movable. When the larynx is high, there is less space in your pharynx, and the pharynx is basically just a fancy word for your throat, okay? It's right back here, and it is split into 3 parts: the nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. Don't worry about that, okay? But the higher the larynx, the smaller the pharynx, and that gives you a more flat tone, okay, and not a huge, warm, round, full-bodied tone, but rather just a smaller, more flat tone, okay? And if the pharynx is bigger, meaning your larynx is lower, you get a more warm kind of sound and a fuller sound. So the larynx and all the other resonators manipulate your tone. Last but not least, I just quickly want to talk about the 5 registers that you have in your voice, just so you know that they're there and why you might be having cracks in your voice. But the entire second module is dedicated to your registers, okay? But just real quick so you have an overview. At the very bottom, you have the vocal fry. That's vocal fry, okay? Then the next one up is your chest voice. Hello, how are you, right? Your speaking voice, or Santa Claus voice. Ho, 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 right? That's your chest voice. Then next you have the mix voice, which is a mix between your chest and your head voice. And the head voice is up here, right? Hello, how are you? I like to call it lullaby voice because you would sing like twinkle, twinkle, little star up in your head voice, right? So the mix in the middle is a mix between your chest voice and your head voice, okay? And then at the very top, we have the whistle register, which is, you know, Mariah Carey, Ariana Grande kind of land. Super duper duper high, okay? So those are your 5 registers. I just quickly wanted to mention that so you understand what's happening in your voice, right? Why you might be having a crack, because when you crack, you're abruptly switching from chest voice to head voice, and there's no seamless transition thanks to the mixed voice, okay? So now that you know, that's great. You have the basics for your registers, but you're gonna look at them in detail in the second module. That is it. This covers a lot of the aspects about the voice and how your instrument works. Obviously, there is so much more to the voice, but I don't want to overwhelm you either. But it is definitely really, really good for you to understand all of these components, how they work together, and all of that wonderful stuff.